how Israel turned $100 million into $26 billion. Let's start with AIPAC, which is an Israeli lobbyist group which operates within the US to the point where it actually can affect US domestic policy. And this was the first step in them turning 100 million to 26 billion. They used that $100 million to pay off, fund, and essentially buy out certain politicians who they knew would be favorable to them. Not only did they use the money to essentially buy politicians in the US, they also used that money to counter the campaigns of those politicians who they believed are not as favorable to their policies. And this was the first step. Once they were able to buy off so many US politicians, they knew full well that when these same politicians have to decide or vote for policy regarding Israel, that they would be very supportive of that. And this is exactly what happened. In April of this year, the US promised an additional support of $26 billion to help in aid and military assistance to the Zionist entity. How? Because the administration, the senators and the other politicians, many of whom are backed and funded by Israel, knew that to continue furthering that support, they better make sure that this bill and this funding gets passed through. And that is what happened. We're an amazing investment, right? But it would be wrong for me to say that Israel was able to achieve this purely by lobbying the government. Many Muslims say, oh, Israel has a really strong lobbyist power. Why don't we do the same? Why can't we have that power? Why can't we start to build leverage over certain Western nations so that we can reap some kind of benefit back home? And the simple answer to that really is there's a big difference between the so-called state of Israel and the state of the Muslims today. Those who have Zionist aspirations are backed by a state, an occupying state. Whereas those who have Islamic aspirations from amongst the Muslims, we have no state. It is as simple as that. The Zionists are able to achieve their goals, their ambitions, their expansion, all because they have a state who also has those same aspirations and who represents the idea of Zionism. Whereas for the Muslim world, although we would like to see the liberation of our land, although we would like to see the unity of our people, although we would like to be in a position of strength, we have no state which represents us. We have not a single system or leadership anywhere in the Muslim world that governs and represents the people according to Islam. And this is the number one problem. Without that state, you're not going to get jack. This is the power of a state. It can affect global policy in a way which no individuals, no institutions, no groups, no think tanks, no multi-billionaires can do. This is why we see such a clear distinction in the way that our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba were treated in Mecca and then the way that they were treated in Medina. Massive difference. In Mecca they were persecuted, they were unalived, they were boycotted, and there's almost nothing that they could do about it. Whereas in Medina, now they had some kind of capability. Now they had some kind of strength. Now they were able to deal with Quraysh and the other tribes of Arabia in a like-for-like manner. You're no longer under the subjugation of a foreign state. You're no longer at the mercy of those who are trying to persecute you. You are now your own entity. You are now your own state. You now have your own subjects. You now are able to implement those laws and policies that you want. Now you can begin to trade with other nations. Now you can begin to make alliances with other nations. And now you can begin to defeat your enemy militarily, economically. Without a state, you don't have any of that. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The need, the dire need for the Muslims today is that they have their own state based on the laws and teachings of Islam.